Hey guys, it's Ryan from RC Maintenance. What we've got today is a 2010 Chevy Cobalt. This bad boy has a check engine light, and we looked at the codes. We have a P0010 and a P0011. What happened is the driver was cruising down the freeway behind a big truck, and something big fell out of the truck. He ran it over. He put a big hole in the oil pan and leaked all the oil out. So what happened was the car went into protection mode. It shut the engine off, wouldn't let him run it anymore, and we replaced the oil pan, put it back together, got the oil put in there, everything is good. Well, as soon as we fired it up, had a check engine light on. So we replaced the components, we erased the codes, fired it back up, let it run for a little bit, check engine light came back on. So what we're doing now is hunting down that check engine light. Those two codes deal with the variable cam timing. So what that means is you have two camshafts. One is an intake cam, one is an exhaust cam. What's going to happen is that oil pressure is allowed to go to these solenoids, and these solenoids tell the oil pressure where to go. And they have these they're called cam phasers. Every manufacturer has a different name for them, and they allow the timing of the camshaft to change depending on oil pressure. It'll retard it or it'll advance it depending on, are we looking for better fuel economy and emissions, or are we looking for better performance for getting on the freeway. So what we're at right now is we're going to find out. We've looked at all data, the information, the solenoid. These solenoids are very, very susceptible to damage and to failure if your oil level is low, if your oil pressure is low. So I'm pretty confident that our intake cam variable cam timing solenoid it's just bad. It failed because it ran out of oil, because it wasn't an issue before. So obviously it's got to be tied into running out of oil. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how to get to it, how to test it, and how to replace it. And then I'll talk about some important things along the way, what you need to do while you're doing this. So first thing we're going to do is get to it. Typically these solenoids, you'll have either one or two depending on the system. Some systems only have one, but some systems have dual overhead cams, each with their own independent cam phaser and cam timing. So what we're going to do is get to it, and they're typically in the valve cover. So to get there on this 2010 Cobalt with a 2.2 liter Ecotec engine, we're going to get this cover off, we need to take off the oil fill cap. We also you might need to remove the oil dipstick, but I don't think you have to, and so that depends on you. If it looks like it's getting in the way, you take it out. One important thing to notice is that if we take this cap off, what do we have? We have access to the inside of the engine. So the longer this is off, the more of an increased chance we have of getting something in there. Bad thing. So what we do is take that off, put it to the side. This just has a couple little ball detents. So we'll pop that loose. We'll pop this loose. We'll lift the whole thing off. Before we even put it down, I'm putting this back. I don't want dust, debris, anything getting into that. So we'll just set this down here for now. Now, if you look right here, these guys are those variable cam timing solenoids. Now we already took this apart, and so now I can remove this, and I stand corrected. Okay, so we've got our cover off. We've got access to our two solenoids. Now the way to figure out which one is the intake and which one is the camshaft is determining which camshaft is close to the intake manifold. Well, this is the air inlet. This is the air box that houses your filter. This is the entire air assembly, which basically shapes and it basically shapes the air so that it comes in at a certain amount, let's say a certain volume and a certain speed. Now if you look under here, you'll see that this is where the throttle body is, and this right here is the plastic intake manifold. So this guy is going to be your intake cam, this right here, and that's what our code is for. if you were to look on the back side, you'll see that's where the exhaust manifold is mounted, and that's where you're going to see, that's how you're going to find out this right here is your exhaust cam. So what we noticed earlier is that these guys didn't want to come out. So I'm squeezing this, it should be releasing, no good. So one thing you can do is use a pair of pliers, whatever you have, squeeze it and see if that gets it. Now this is still not coming off. One important thing to notice is that if you have an engine with 175,000 miles on it that's 9 years old, this plastic has gotten hot and cold so many times, a ton of times. So this plastic will it's ready to break anytime you want to let it. So what I'll do here is use this guy, a little pick. It's got a couple angles, and this is my favorite one because it seems to be the most useful. And so you'll get in there, and you can pry from down below. You'll pull it up. This guy's not opening enough, so if you can pull it right on the clip, that'll let you pull it right off. No big deal. So we've got that. We've got access to this. We can go ahead and take this off too. Try that again. There we go. No big deal. You know what I just noticed? I didn't notice this before. Look right here. Right here you have... Can you guess which one's the intake, which one's the exhaust? There you go. That's easy enough. Now I have read that these are interchangeable, so I'm not sure why one is black and one is gray. In some cases you'll find that these are the same part. In other cases you'll find that one is obviously the intake, one is obviously the exhaust, and only one will fit in one position and not the other. So if we're going to take this guy out, how about this? First thing we're going to do is test this. We found out what the specs were, and we're going to use a multimeter set to ohms to measure resistance. Okay, I've got my Blue Point digital volt ohm meter or digital multimeter. It has a digital reading. It'll give me a very clear number. You see UTI, Universal Technical Institute. I got this when I went to my trade school program back in 2000, 2001. Shameless plug. I'm not getting paid. I just love the school and love what I've received from going to school. An education that didn't cost me $80,000, and I've made a lot of money over the years, and I've always had to work. Okay, so here we go. We've got it set to ohms, which has this little omega symbol. And what we're going to see is that with this, we're going to touch one terminal in here. We're going to touch the other terminal with the other side. The thing is, this should read somewhere between 5 and 7 ohms. And if you know what kilo ohms means, that little K on the right side. Let me see if I could point to that and hold these at the same time. That K right there stands for kilo or 1,000. So it's 72,000 ohms. So that's pretty well outside of the 5 to 7 ohm range. Now if we were to look at the other one, I didn't check the spec for this one, but if I were to check this one, okay, somewhere between 7 and 10 ohms. I'm not replacing that one. Now it's not a bad practice because this is so old to go ahead and replace both of them, but because we're just working on the one problem, we want to eliminate that. Now if you can verify that these two are exactly the same, you can swap them out and run just the intake on the exhaust and exhaust on the intake side. Then you should get the same code except for the exhaust cam. In this case, we've already tested. This is guaranteed the problem. 5 to 7 ohms versus 70, 80,000 ohms. It's way outside. The inside of this has completely failed. Okay, so I'll put this away. We're done with it. Okay, so anytime you work on your engine and you're going to make the inside of the engine accessible, basically if you remove something that exposes the inside of the engine, you want to make sure you're not putting dirt in there. Remember what we said about the oil cap? Basic thing, but we don't leave it off. We take it off, do what we have to do, put it back on. At least we're keeping it covered and safe. Well, we're going to take this guy out, the intake variable valve cam timing solenoid. There are so many names for these. I looked it up on AutoZone's website and I could not figure it out, because according to all data it's got one name, but according to all AutoZone it's got another name. But it's variable valve timing, variable cam timing. Anyways, so we're going to remove this solenoid, and when we do, we're going to expose the engine. So I don't have the part yet, I'm not going to remove it now. So what I will do right now though is I will take compressed air and blow it all out. So if you get a closer shot, you can see how dirty it is in here. We actually already blew it out, but we're going to do it one more time just to make sure it's nice and cleaned out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on safety glasses, because if I put out 130 psi, that's a lot of airflow. I don't want to get any of that junk in my eyes, because one of the most important things in my arsenal of tools, my toolbox, is my eyesight. So if my eyes are damaged, I can't make any money. I can't feed my family. I can't buy a toy, a motorcycle, whatever. Alright, so here we go. We're going to go ahead and just blow all this out. And there you go. Now we don't have to worry about anything getting into the engine. Even though we're going to have it exposed only for, a minute, 30 seconds maybe. That's very important. Okay, so it's time to remove that solenoid. You might need a little extension. I'm just using a 1/4-inch drive with a little 3-inch extension and a deep 10mm socket. I've got Mac, I've got Craftsman, I've got some kind of cheap whatever. So we're just going to remove this. See how easy that was? There was no effort. I like using a nice little flexible ratchet, because then I can put it like this and go nice and fast. A lot of times I use a 1/4-inch drive electric ratchet. Sometimes it's just easier to take this off and take that sucker the rest of the way out by hand without even using the ratchet. Okay, and then see if this guy will come out. So we'll see if we can give a little tug on it like this without getting too crazy. If not, we could pry underneath it. But right now it's not wanting to move. So sometimes you just need to turn it. Okay, that is very solid in there. It's now we have Cornwell. We've got more Craftsman. I don't discriminate with my tools. So what I'm going to do here, you can get a shot in there. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off with trying to pry right here. If I pry it, it should turn. Okay, so it's turning. That's good. And now we know that basically what's holding it in is that O-ring that's nice and hard. So I can try and pry underneath that briefly. I can try, see if I can get underneath it with this somehow. Nope. Gotta be careful not to pry on the wrong thing. Always watch what you're doing. You don't want to break stuff. So at this point I might just grab it with this again and see if I can just pop it out. Oh, there we go. No big deal. Look at that. We got stuff in there. So you see these screens? There are 3 screens. The screens are looking like they're in good shape. But what we do have is chunks. I don't know if that's just goop. That's actual metal, it looks like, maybe. I don't know if it's metal. Might just be debris. If you get any debris in there, that's a problem. It's going to cause problems with this. Sometimes you'll see these screens will actually get clogged up, or these screens will they'll actually get sucked into the holes in the return. So there you go. So that's the removal process. Next step we'll do is reinstall the new one. Well, we'll install the new one because we didn't take the new one out. I'm going to put that back in there for now because we don't have the new part. And then we'll get the new part and install it. Okay, we got our parts. Or should I say part? You always want to verify it's the right part. This is kind of a nice little setup. It comes with a replacement bolt for you, which also has a little rubber O-ring on the inside. That's a nice touch. This little rubber O-ring provides some resistance and it prevents this from falling out, which is really convenient in certain cases where, let's say you're putting it in there and maybe it's not as easy to get to as this one. Well, if you put it down in there and you can't really reach it except with an extending, like an extension on a socket, then you're going to find that it's easy to knock that sucker out and drop it, and that is miserable. Alright, so we'll take our old one out. We'll look at our new one, and obviously they're exactly the same. So what we'll do here, put that back in. I got a little little oil in this oil cap, and you always want to lubricate your O-rings. If it's going into the engine, just put a little engine oil on it. And depending on what you're installing, whatever it is that you're installing with an O-ring, if it's into a tight fit like that and it's designed to seal, you want to make sure you lubricate it. That way you prevent, one, you prevent this from getting damaged when you install it. Two, you prevent it from flopping out or twisting over. Sometimes your O-rings are square shaped instead of round. What I mean is the profile would be, instead of this how it's round like this, it would be squared. That's another video. Alright, so we're going to take this out, put the new one in. If you need to, kind of wiggle it to get down there. Push it all the way down there to where it's flush and snug. For now, I'm going to take this guy and put it off to the side. Alright. Now, depending on your setup, you might need to drive it in with the bolt. So we'll at least start the bolt and get it down to where it's kind of snug. Anytime you're installing something like this, use manual. Do not use a power tool. And if you look, you can see as I tighten this up, it's actually drawing it in. I'm not killing it, and it's going very easily, but it was just getting over that little lip. See, if you watch it, it's still driving it down. Now it's there. So we're going to torque it. You want to make sure you find out what the torque setting is. And what the torque setting is how tight to twist that bolt. If you don't tighten it enough, it will potentially come loose. If you tighten it too much, you can break it and make it hard to get it off later. Alright, so I torqued it to 89 inch-pounds or 10 Newton meters. And basically, if you don't have an inch-pound torque wrench, you can divide 89 by 12, which is 7.4 roughly. But something like this, you want to get close. Something like this, you want to make sure you have a very small and low ranging torque wrench. So I'm gonna put the connector back on. Make sure they're both clipped on because we took that other one off, and you can tell that they're both sitting side by side. They're both at the same level. We're lucky because in some cases on some years of this, you actually have to remove the entire valve cover. That means you have to take the harness, you have to take all the coils, and you've got to remove the valve cover, which means removing this and some other items to get to these. But luckily on this one, you just pop a single bolt out and boom, you're done. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go and put our cover back on. This engine cover has, if you look, it's got these two rubber receiver looking pieces. That one, and it's got one here. They're actually like two options, I guess. And then you've got where you put your, this is where you slide it over where the neck is to add oil filler. And then it's got all this. This is, again, 9 years old, about 175,000 miles. So this insulation is kind of yucky. So I'm just careful with it. I don't mess with it. Okay, if you need to, you can remove your oil dipstick. Set it off to the side. You'll possibly get a little oil on the side there. You can wipe that up. And then very briefly, we'll remove the oil filler cap. When you install this, you want to make sure you slide this over the rod right here. You can see this rod right here, and we have the same thing over here. That's the other part. So you want to line it up with those three things. So we'll put it right here, and then we'll slide it over our oil filler. And remember, I don't like to leave this exposed, so before I even finish, I'm going to go ahead and put the cap on and put this one in, because you can still get junk in here, even though it's a tiny little rod. And now we'll make sure we're good here. You can feel around. You can go right there. Once you push it down, you hear that click. I'll listen for that if you can hear it. Push it down, and it pops into place. And we know that it's there because if I give it a slight tug, it's not coming up. Same thing here. Slight tug, not coming out. Okay, so that's it. Now we're going to fire it up and see how she sounds. Sounds pretty smooth. Before we did this, it had a little bit of a weird engine sound in it. That would just be based on the cam timing being off. And so it wanted to do one thing, but the cam wasn't doing what it was supposed to. It was staying retarded or advanced, depending on what it was doing at the time. So it sounds better right now. Before it sounded like a little bit of valve noise. I don't hear it now. So what we need to do is replace the, so now what we need to do is make sure we clean up the oil underneath here, and then erase the codes, drive it, and see what happens. Okay, so we road tested it after erasing the codes, and ran great, no problems at all. Check engine light did not come back on. When we first discovered the problem, the check engine light came on immediately, just idling outside. Now we drove it around, gave it a few miles, and everything's all good. So we're good to go. Success. So if you guys want to see some more videos, or if you have some ideas or a question, and you want to see something specific, or you want to learn something specific, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to go ahead and turn on subscriptions. This is a new channel, and I'm learning too. So let's learn together. Have a good day.